Hi, I'm Jason Klum, the host of the Comedy... Let me try that again. I'm Jason Klum, and I'm the host of the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. I'm listening to a comedy album a day for all of 2017. This one is from 2013. It is Jimmy Pardo's Sprezzatura, available on AST Records. If you go to astrecords.com, you can find it there. Obviously, on vinyl. I'm fortunate enough to have an autographed copy. I was just about to frame it, so I thought, well, why not talk about this album today and give it another listen? It's crowd work. If you know Jimmy Pardo's work, he does crowd work. If you don't know Jimmy Pardo's work, he does crowd work. But it's better crowd work than I've personally ever heard. I guess it would have to be to do a whole album of it. But it's this particular skill where there are comedians. By the way, you can find the rest of this at youtube.com/comedyonvinyl because we're about to hit a minute on Instagram. There are certain comedians who do crowd work, and I don't want to judge it, but they have a bag of tricks that they rely on in order to sort of hammer home their point and make their stuff work. Because there has to be a potency to a joke, even if it's an insult or even if it just sounds like an insult, which is what a lot of what Jimmy does, because I think it's genuinely so kind-hearted. And that's, by the way, not to diminish the impact of what he does and the sort of apparent meanness, which it's just not even, but you can't call it mean. It would be very hard to get offended at Jimmy Pardo, although I'm sure he's got such a big audience, it's very easy to find people who are offended at something every once in a while. But he does the kind of crowd work that is just so... There's nobody that has that kind of speed. He has a hair trigger that just most people don't have, but it's pointed. Where there are people who can be fast, there are people who can be pointed. He's one of the few people who can mix those two things and have it still work. I mean, one of the other problems I'm having in talking about this and picking it apart is it goes by so fast. It's a full-length album, but he is such a fast comedian, and he tells the jokes with such joy, and he picks with such joy that you roll along with it the whole time. There are not a lot of albums that are like this. And, this is going to be a product of this having been made in 2013, and I'm reviewing it in 2017. So a lot of the albums I listen to where it's like, well, that was a bit slow because I didn't get any of the references. Well, this is not reference heavy. Jimmy Pardo knows how to do a reference, and he knows his audience when he's going to make a reference. But when he's not, the stuff is very, very specifically about one person in the audience, but you don't need to have seen them to get the joke. You don't really care to have seen them to get the joke. I think the impact of it is the fact that somebody just said that thing. And I think that's one of the pieces of magic of the way Jimmy Pardo does humor. If you listen to his podcast, he will be ironically everything. Ironically sexist, ironically racist, ironically pro-Cosby. All kinds of things just because the glee is that somebody said it, but you also, if you have a brain in your head, are fully aware that this man would never mean that. And again, you also hear the glee with which he says it, where it's clearly this is a guy who's enjoying having said it, who's enjoying the idea. The joke is, wouldn't it be funny if somebody were dumb enough to say this thing or mean enough to say this thing? And that, I think, is actually the character. That's supposed to be the character of all stand-up. Where wouldn't it be funny if you met a person at a party and they were dumb enough to say this thing, or they were gutsy enough to say this thing? Like, isn't that funny? But most of the time people can't pull that off, and that's where people get super offended, and they can't separate the person from the stand-up. And I actually think that that's a weakness of most stand-up, and not all stand-up, of course, but I think a lot of stand-up has that weakness where everybody immediately assumes that that's a person talking, and that doesn't help any comedians out there who kind of think they have to sort of fall in line and become that character. That might make, that might make for big bucks for some comedians, but I think there are other comedians who are so much about the craft, like Jimmy Pardo, that, I don't know, the glee with which he sells this is an art in and of itself. So there's just something about it. If you ever see him live, I cannot recommend it enough. See Jimmy Pardo live, and the delight with which he will tell a joke, the delight with which he will pick, and the delight with which he will then pick on you for getting quote unquote offended. It's very well honed. It's beautiful. And this is a great album. I mean, this is a perfect example of it. So go to astrecords.com. I don't know if you can still get it on vinyl. I'm assuming you can. It's wonderful. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get him to sign it to you because, well, to Jason, because you're not Jason, unless your name is Jason. The joke was you're not going to get it to. It's a little late at night. Anyway, listen to Sprezzatura. It's great. It's wonderful. And if you get it, you can see what the name of the. I can tell you what it means. A certain nonchalance, so as to conceal all art and make whatever one does or says appear to be without effort and almost without any thought about it. So what I basically just did is, I basically just defined. I basically just spent 6 minutes saying that, but it's great. It's wonderful. It's delightful. You should also listen to Never Not Funny, his podcast, and watch anything he does. Follow us at Comedy on Vinyl everywhere that you can follow us. Listen to the podcast. Go to stolendress.com for other podcasts that I do. I recently released, well, I didn't release, but I had, with the help of people in a position to know, the creation of the smallest comedy record in the world. I called it an album, but technically it's 10 seconds each side. It's an inch and a half. So that's a kind of fun thing. If you go to danaj.com, you can learn more about that. That's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, have a good thing. And yes, I have worn this shirt several times before on here.